Join us on the show right now from the World Forum on the Future of Sports Shooting Activities. Mr. Tom Mason is with us. And Tom, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Cam.
Glad to have you with us tonight. You've spent, is it fair to say, too much time at the United Nations over the past several years?
Well, it's a lot of time. It's not too much because I enjoy what I'm doing, and I think it's important. I think you probably think it's important too.
I definitely do, especially given what we are seeing out of the United Nations. I mean, we've got a report that was released last week that says internet access is a human right. This comes several years after another report said that self-defense is not a human right. So you've got a right to Facebook, but not a firearm, according to the UN.
That's right. One's fashionable and one's not.
This is I think very indicative of why so many Americans just instinctively distrust the United Nations, because the things that we have been told, not just in our lifetime, but for the entire history of this nation, that are our human rights, not granted to us by government, but recognized by our government, are in fact nothing more than novel legal theories, and a product that has been around for less than 50 years is all of a sudden a human right that must be provided to people the world over. It just doesn't, frankly, it doesn't seem right, Tom.
Cam, you make some very good points, and some of them are downright philosophical, and that should not diminish them at all. And I say philosophical, I mean these are deep historic things.
Mm-hmm.
The right to bear arms, the right to self-defense, is a very, very much of an ancient right. It goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. If you really do the scholarship, I think Dave Koppel has done some incredible work on this.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've had Dave on, but it is nothing at all novel about it. It is about as fundamental as you can get. On the other hand, the United Nations is pretty much the figment of Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Roosevelt's imagination. It just doesn't have the intellectual or historical background that our government and the rights that we exercise against our government have. So it's really no comparison.
Absolutely. But, we know that while the United Nations may try to spend millions or perhaps billions of dollars to bring the internet to the world, at the same time they are working very hard on an arms trade treaty. And we saw a column this week that got a lot of attention from Forbes.com. I believe a college professor down in Houston, Texas, talking about this arms trade treaty and what it could mean to gun owners. And the blog UNDispatch.com wrote a piece, Tom, memo to cranks, they said. The arms trade treaty will not affect your ability to buy guns. Have you had a chance to look at this?
Absolutely. And it popped up on my search engines. It's by a woman by the name of Diana Wugler, W-E-G-E-R. I think that's a good German name. Nothing wrong with that, but I think that's a German name like Kruger.
Okay.
Kruger. Perhaps like Ruger, one of our favorite names.
Or Freddy Krueger. You never know.
Freddy Krueger. Enough of this. This we're going to get carried away with the puns. But anyway, as far as I know, she has never actually been to an ATT meeting. Now, she might have been in the back of the room, but I certainly don't know of her. And it's a fascinating article. It goes on, and of course, the first thing that's fascinating about it is a memo to cranks. Now, that's really a great way to convince your opposition, is to call them a crank. But,
yeah, isn't it?
But she goes on and she talks about how she theoretically tries to refute the points made in the Forbes article, but she's simply wrong. For instance, she says that the arms trade treaty could possibly ban the sale, private ownership of semi-automatic firearms. And then she says this is not the case. Well, if she had been there in all the hearings that I've been in, and they're more presentations, not hearings in the sense that we think of hearings.
Yeah.
She would realize that is a constant theme that is constantly touted by the anti-gun groups such as the ANSA. Then she brings up another point. She says the Forbes article said it could create an international gun registry. And she says, no, that it wouldn't do that. Well, as a matter of fact, it could exactly do that. because numerous proposals that are being considered under the Arms Trade Treaty have to do with the following of a firearm all throughout its life. And if you follow a firearm all throughout its life, you have to have registration. And the Arms Trade Treaty is to a great extent concentrates on international trade, but there are innumerable ways that it could impact civilian firearms ownership in the United States. We're very disappointed where the treaty is going at this moment. At one time in January, there was a proposal to exempt civilian firearms, or at least some civilian firearms.
Okay.
They phrased it in the terms of hunting rifles, but it was an exemption for civilian stuff from the treaty. But then the last time we met, that exemption was pulled out.
Oh, really?
We're going to have to make a statement here coming up. We're going to meet again in July. The firearms community is going to have to make a statement in July that it just unequivocally, the Arms Trade Treaty has to exempt out civilian firearms. The Arms Trade Treaty was originally intended to be a disarmament treaty, a trade treaty that would regulate the international sale of military weapons systems. And the anti-gun people have attached themselves to this treaty. They've done that with a vengeance, and they look upon it as a vehicle for international gun control. And there's a real conflict there because the Arms Trade Treaty, like I say, is a trade treaty to control major weapon systems. Now, I'm not here to debate for or against that. That's not within our brief. But it should not be intended to be a vehicle for international gun control, and that's what the anti-gun groups would like. I'm using strong language, but that is the truth of it.
Well, and to that end, Tom, I mean, are they hijacking this for their own purposes, or are they running into any resistance at all from? I mean, besides from groups like the World Forum and the Future Sports Shooting Activities.
Well, of course, they're running into resistance from the NRA. I mean, let's be very frank. The NRA is the strong player there, and the NRA is probably has been recognized even by the UN and even by our opponents as one of the strongest NGOs at the UN, and that's because we have the ear of the United States Senate to a great extent. But you used the term hijacked. To a certain extent, the ATT has been hijacked. Originally, it was proposed by by the Brits, and some of the people pushing the treaty were the British defense industry, who wanted to, as they called, a level playing field all over the world, so international regulation of arms trades, military arms trades, were uniform all over the world. And there was something to that. Because the Brits felt that they did not have to jump through the same hoops that the people from Brazil had to jump through. Now, that's a commercial, international consideration. But what happened was that the British left, and essentially some of the bureaucrats in the British Ministry of Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs decided to kind of kowtow to their left wing and bring into the whole process the anti-gun movement. And that's why the IANSA got so involved. That's why a group called Control Arms got involved. And so it's got a little bit out of control. Now, there are some strong players on the other side. Russia, China, Pakistan are really not that interested in having an arms trade treaty that even covers small arms and light weapons, because for some various reasons. We would probably take no position per se on a general exclusion of military small arms and light weapons, but we would take a position that it's absolutely necessary to exclude civilian firearms, which are small arms and light weapons. Most of the small arms and light weapons in the world are really firearms, and of all the firearms in the world, 60% of the firearms in the world, this is the world, 60 to 70% of the firearms in the world are legally owned by civilians. And it's quite odd because when you go to these meetings, you'd think that nobody was aware of that fact. And of the remaining, let's say 40 to 30%, probably say 30%, the remaining 30%, probably 20 of that 30% are owned by police, and the rest by the military. So it's kind of an interesting mix. Most of the small arms in the world are legally owned by civilians, and of that number, of the 60 to 70% of the small arms in the world legally owned by civilians, 60% of those are, guess where? United States. So you really can't talk about this subject.
Yeah.
You really cannot talk about this subject without talking about the firearms owners in the United States. Just cannot be done.
All right. Well, listen, Tom. As
I'm
always,
sorry, I'm holding
no.
forth, Cam, but
I listen. You know so much more about this than I do. I'm happy that you're on the show so we can learn about this. What's the next big meeting at the United Nations? I mean, what happens next?
okay, we're having a ATT meeting. It's called the ATT Preparatory Committee meeting. It's from July 11th through July 15th in New York. The NRA will be there. I think even your people will be there. That nice lady you work with will probably even be there.
Yeah, I imagine so. Jenny has been covering this issue for years.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right. Well, Tom, thanks again, sir, and look forward to talking to you very soon. And thanks again for all you're doing up there.
Hey, you keep up the good work yourself, Cam.
Thank you, sir. Tom Mason joining us from the World Forum on the Future of Sports Shooting Activities.